Hello everyone, welcome to an in-depth Better Call Saul theory. In this theory, we will be discussing whether or not Jimmy Mcgill and Saul Goodman are the same person. The transformation of Jimmy Mcgill into Saul Goodman is often characterized as a tragedy of circumstance. However, a forensic examination of the Better Call Saul timeline suggests a more complex interaction between internal character flaws and external trauma. In this video, we will trace the trajectory of Jimmy Mcgill's moral compromises, focusing on Jimmy's actions and behaviors throughout the series, influenced or not by other characters, to determine if Jimmy Mcgill and Saul Goodman are the same person. We will basically be trying to figure out if Jimmy Mcgill was always going to become Saul Goodman, or if he was just a product of his peers and a product of his own life decisions. So, without further ado, let's start from the first episode. Better Call Saul first introduces us to Jimmy Mcgill rehearsing a defense for his clients in a washroom. His clients are three teenagers that defiled a human body by chopping off the body's head and fornicating with it. Early season 1, we see Jimmy struggle with finding clients who have an IQ above 80. We see him with the skateboard twins, the Kettlemans, the talking toilet, and the man who wants to start his own nation in the US. During this period, Jimmy discovers a significant opportunity in elder law. While drafting wills, he uncovers a fraud scheme at Sandpiper Crossing, leading to a class action lawsuit. This case spans the duration of the series, not reaching a settlement until season 6, episode 7. This is the same episode in which Howard Hamlin is killed, an event that serves as a primary example of the collateral damage resulting from Jimmy's actions. The rejection of Jimmy by HHM is often cited as a catalyst for his behavior. When Jimmy brought the Sandpiper case to the firm, Howard Hamlin refused to hire him. A decision we find out was actually made by Jimmy's brother, Chuck Mcgill. Chuck did not view Jimmy as a real lawyer. While it is theorized that if Chuck would have just let Jimmy work at HHM, it could have prevented Jimmy's long descent into the criminal underworld. However, unfortunately, we have evidence that would suggest otherwise. In season 2, Jimmy secures a position at Davis and Maine with significant benefits and autonomy. However, he deliberately sabotages this employment because he's unable to conform to standard legal procedures. This indicates that his behavior is driven by an internal preference for subverting rules rather than purely external circumstances. This pattern is consistent throughout the timeline. Just in season 1, while attempting to practice legitimate law, he simultaneously engages in countless illegal activities, such as the billboard stunt, which is a form of fraud, insurance fraud with the skateboard twins, getting Mike to steal $1.6 million from the Kettlemans, which is solicitation to commit a felony, conspiracy, burglary and theft, which is a accomplice liability, taking a $30,000 legal retainer from the Kettlemans, which was actually just a bribe to keep quiet about the $1.6 million the Kettleman embezzled, and the Rolex scam with his best friend Marco. Following Marco's death, Jimmy took his pinky ring, wearing it throughout the remainder of Better Call Saul and into the Breaking Bad timeline. This serves as a physical indicator of his refusal to abandon his past behaviors. Jimmy's actions and criminal behavior from just season 1 alone is really nothing compared to the rest of the series. In season 2, Jimmy engaged in the intentional falsification of legal documents regarding the Mesa Verde account to sabotage the professional standing of his brother, Chuck Mcgill, and also had a foam battery planted on Chuck in the courtroom, which led to him having a serious mental breakdown in front of everyone in the court and his ex-wife.
Jimmy! He defecated through a sunroof. And I saved him. I shouldn't have. I took him into my own firm. What was I thinking? He'll never change. He'll never change. Ever since he was 9, always the same. Couldn't keep his hands out of the cash drawer. But not our Jimmy. Couldn't be precious Jimmy.
Which led to Chuck setting his house on fire and him not leaving, causing his own death. Jimmy obviously wasn't the greatest brother. Chuck wasn't either. Chuck had an entire house to himself and could have housed Jimmy in season 1 when Jimmy was struggling financially and sleeping in the nail salon on a sofa bed. And also, like I mentioned earlier, Chuck could have just let Jimmy work at HHM from the beginning when he passed the bar when he was still working in the HHM mailroom. Despite all of this, nothing really justifies Chuck's death. Jimmy's intentions in the courtroom was purely to humiliate Chuck and expose his made-up mental illness. And honestly, Chuck deserved every bit of it. Chuck was kind of an asshole in this series. He didn't want his own brother working alongside him, but we do know that it is justified in his own head, as Chuck always saw Jimmy for what he is, Slippin' Jimmy, which would get proven again and again until the end of the series. Jimmy would continue to be Slippin' Jimmy when in season 3 he would utilize psychological manipulation against the Sandpiper Crossing residents, specifically creating social isolation for Irene Landry to expedite a financial settlement for his own personal gain. This, in my opinion, is actually the worst thing Jimmy has ever done in the entirety of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. He psychologically manipulated elderly people so that they would not be friends with the Sandpiper class representative, just so that he can have a little bit of money a little quicker. 1.1 million exactly, or 1.2 million. Jimmy would end up resolving the situation by putting himself on a hot mic, which was intentional, saying that, oh, I hate old people and old people are smelly, bringing the elderly people back together and friends again, or something like that. But that also removed him from being able to practice elder law, because now all old people would hate him. On a quick side note, this is just a small list of the worst things Jimmy has done in the subsequent seasons. Jimmy has done a lot more criminal activity in these seasons than I'm going to mention, because this video would be, well, maybe half the duration of Better Call Saul. Continuing on, in Season 5, during the formal adoption of the Saul Goodman persona, he functioned as a friend of the cartel, facilitating money laundering and obstruction of justice for Lalo Salamanca. Did Jimmy learn from his actions from working with the cartel? Yes, he did. He never works for the cartel again after Lalo Salamanca, and only works with low-level criminals and high-level criminals. Isn't that fantastic? And we finally circle back to Howard Hamlin. In Season 6, Saul Goodman and Kim Wexler come up with this cruel plan to destroy the character and reputation of Howard Hamlin for fun, and so that they can both get the Sandpiper Crossing money faster, unintentionally causing Howard Hamlin's death. The epiphany of Saul Goodman's actions, the result of his greed and his cruel behavior, causing the death of an innocent man. Now, does Jimmy/Saul finally realize his actions have serious consequences? No, he never actually does learn that. We know this because in the final chronological act of Better Call Saul, it's demonstrated that Jimmy McGill's transition into the Gene Takovic persona did not result in a genuine reformation, but rather a temporary period of criminal dormancy. While residing in Omaha, he eventually revitalized his Slippin' Jimmy instincts by orchestrating a sophisticated identity theft ring. This operation involved targeting affluent victims at upscale bars, drugging them with sedative cocktails, and dispatching his goons to photograph their sensitive financial records and credit cards. This pattern of behavior eventually escalated into felony home invasion, when Jimmy personally entered the residence of a victim suffering from pancreatic cancer and was almost willing to murder an old lady to keep his identity a secret. Saul actually couldn't bring himself to harm the old lady to prevent her from calling the police, forcing him to go on the run. Saul was forced to flee from her home, and in an ironic twist of fate, he ended up hiding in a dumpster where he once was helping elderly people, now in a dumpster because, like I said, elderly people no longer like Saul Goodman. Joking. He's in one now as a symbolic reminder of what he once was and could have been to what he actually became because of his own actions. Jimmy would eventually get apprehended by law enforcement, and he was initially faced with a sentence of life imprisonment plus 190 years for his extensive role in the Heisenberg empire, including money laundering and acting as an accessory to the murders of federal agents. However, by readopting the Saul Goodman persona, he utilized a fabricated narrative that he was manipulated by Heisenberg and was forced to work with him, successfully negotiating his life sentence down to a fixed term of only 7 years in a low security facility with mint chocolate chip ice cream to be delivered to his prison cell every Friday. However, during the final sentencing of the hearing, Kim Wexler shows up in the courtroom, and that prompted Jimmy to disregard his previous 7-year term. He then goes on to deliver a comprehensive sworn confession admitting to his role in the drug trade and his guilt in the deaths of Chuck Mcgill and Howard Hamlin. By choosing moral accountability over his negotiated 7-year term, Jimmy received a final sentence of 86 years in a maximum security federal prison. This act effectively terminated the Saul Goodman persona, confirming that while the two identities are occupied by the same human body, the personalities are only deployed when it's dictated by the circumstances. So, do we finally have an answer to the theory, is Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman the same person? Yes, we do. Unlike the theory of Walter White and Heisenberg being the same person, where I comprehensively compared the two in a deep dive analysis using AI functional machine learning algorithms to determine whether or not they are the same person, we still know that Walter White started out as a little bitch-ass high school teacher and slowly transformed into a cunning manipulative kingpin till the very end of Breaking Bad, where no doubt if Breaking Bad continued, Walter White would still be on the same path of destruction. Not like Jimmy McGill, where we see his evil actions, of course, but we also see the good and the heart Jimmy still has deep down throughout Better Call Saul. And we also see this at the very end, where he finally took responsibility for his actions. So the answer to the theory is yes, Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman are in fact the same person.